All right, well, welcome everyone. This is the June 2017 webinar, and today we have Stephen Brown with us, but we're going to start with a few announcements from Wendy Wilbur.
Thanks, Emily, and thanks everyone for tuning in today to the webinar. It looks like we have an excellent turnout, so I'm excited about that. Um, let's see what's going on. We're having a rainy, hot summer, which is excellent. And this is our 6th webinar of the year. We have 6 more coming up. I think they're really a great success, so I hope that you all plan on continuing to tune in for CEUs. Emily, I hate to ask you this, but have you hit record? Okay. So
Yes, I did.
thank you. As I usually do at the beginning of the webinar, I give you an update on the Master Gardener Conference that we have coming up in October. It's going to be October 15th through 18th. Registration is now open, and we've got some great speakers lined up and some great tours, so I hope you'll consider coming out for that. And there's our conference committee: David Austin, Nicole Pinson, Terry DeValier, Maxine Hunter, Claire Lewis, Emily Eubanks, Prissy Fletcher, Tara Freeman, and Alicia Lamborn. So if you see any of those names and want to find out more about the conference, just check in with them. I'm really excited to announce our 2 very special speakers that we have. Jenks Farmer, who wrote the book Deep Rooted Wisdom, is going to be speaking as our kickoff speaker on Monday, and he is from South Carolina. He loves crinum lilies, he loves soil building. He really takes a lot of inspiration from different gardeners around the South, so he's going to be excellent. And then on Tuesday of the conference, we're going to have this young woman, Carol Michelle, who is a humorous speaker about gardening, and her program is going to be called Potted and Pruned, Real Life Stories of Gardeners. And she is renowned to have the largest hoe collection in the world, so we have to ask her about that. And then on Wednesday of the conference, we're going to have 2 excellent butterfly experts. UF's Jarrett Daniels, he's shown there with the Miami Blue, one of the butterflies he's helped to conserve. And then also the Florida Wildlife, Scotts Davis is going to be with us. He is from St. Mark's Wildlife Refuge, and his images of monarchs and milkweed are just amazing. So I hope you have an opportunity to join us at the conference for that. Our speaker today is Stephen Brown. Many of you have heard Stephen speak on flowering trees. He is from the Lee County Extension Office down in Fort Myers. I saw Stephen give a presentation similar to this back in March, and I said, Stephen, we've got to get you to come and do the webinar for us, because I know the Master Gardeners are going to love this information. So Stephen is our expert, statewide expert, regional expert, and international expert in flowering trees. So Stephen, thank you so much for being with us today. And at the end of your program, you have some questions, and if the Master Gardeners will write those questions down and turn them into their Master Gardener coordinator, they will get an hour CEU time for this presentation. So Stephen, if you could.
Can everyone hear me? Hopefully so. Can you hear me, Wendy?
Yes, I can hear you, Stephen.
I can hear you perfectly. You're live and broadcasting over Florida.
Okay, I want everyone to know that this is my first time actually conducting a webinar, and I think it's going to work out good. First of all, I want to thank you all for attending today's webinar, wherever you are. Hopefully at the end, you will learn something. So let me kick it off right now. The title is Ornamental Flowering Trees, and I want to kind of define that. It's not advancing. It's not advancing. Okay, there it is. Okay. So
try it again, Stephen.
Okay. Not
All
advancing.
Right, I'm doing that. I clicked on it, so.
Let me try this. Okay, I'm going to try that. We're there. What are flowering trees? Everyone knows that flowering trees are basically broken down into the angiosperms. And there are basically two blocks of flowering trees. Those with flowers that are not conspicuous. And these are not the ornamental flowering trees. So, for example, to your left, you see catkins. And that's the inflorescence coming off oak trees in general. To your right, black olive. That's another type of inflorescence, but as in both cases, you can clearly see that there is not spectacular about these flowers. Matter of fact, most people look at them and they don't even know they're flowering. So ornamental flowering trees, therefore, are trees whose flowers are highly visible. There is a display of flowers. And to the left, you see the red silk cotton. Spectacular. That is a solitary flowers, but its large is spectacular. To the right, we see jacaranda. That's an inflorescence arranged in a panicle. So, most of Florida flowering trees come out of the tropics. So we're looking at flowering trees that are for the most part, they're not native to Florida. They come out of South America, even India and Africa. So there's a wide worldwide breadth. So they're from basically warm climate. Now, that then becomes our limiting factor, means that because many of them originated in cold climates, if we put them in the wrong places, meaning it's too cold, that becomes a limiting or the greatest limiting factor. However, most of these that I'm going to show will survive in parts of North Florida, not many, but certainly in Central and South Florida. So let's take a look, and I'm just going to remind you all about the hardiness zone. I think you all know what that is. But if we take a look at zone 11, the minimum, and this is what it means now, the minimum average winter temperature, that's average, is 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Not to say it can't get down to 32, but that's the average minimum. And if you take a look at zone 10B, the average cold minimum in the winter is going to be about 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And for many of us, like in Lee County, Fort Myers, the average minimum in 10A is 30. So what that essentially means is that if you have a tree and it's not adapted to zone 11, put it in zone 10A, there's a good chance that it might die because of the cold. And by the way, for some of these tropical trees, not so much trees, but shrubberies, you don't have to go down to 32 degrees Fahrenheit to freeze them out. It can be at 40. They don't look good. So zone 9B is 25 degrees Fahrenheit, minimum winter average. 9A, of course, is 20 degrees. Let's move on from there. I've been studying flowering trees for, I don't know, many years. And one of the things that I've noticed with trees, that for a given tree in a particular species located in the same town, let's say Fort Myers or Broward or Palm Beach, when they do flower, even if they're 10 feet apart or a mile apart, they tend to flower in sequential order. So I called many of these trees sequential bloomer. The tababua is one. And if we take a look here, if this particular tree in 1 year flower March 1st, this one may be March 5th, and this one may be March 10th. Let's follow this to a second year. And again, you can see that the order remained the same. Several days apart, but the order remained the same. And in the third year, you can see what's happening there. And in this particular case, we're looking at some tababuas, and every year for 20 years, the one on the left flowers first, middle second, and the one on the right flowers third. And you can see even the one on the right is not fully clothed with flower at that point. So these I call sequential bloomers, and many trees in a particular species, even if you fertilize them some more, they tend to hang on to that seed of bloom. One other thing that I want you to consider when you plant a tree, consider how much room it eventually will take up and how fast it grows. So generally, fast growers occupy most space. August 20th, August 2011, a young boy and a Royal Poinciana tree. The question is, in a few years, who's going to be taller? You all know the answer, but let's visually see. There we are, several years later. What is that, 4 years later? More or less, the tree is much larger, and the boy is also much larger. So I want to introduce a concept here, and I call this intense blooming days. Now, what is that? This is a way in which you, if you were in the industry, if you were a landscape architect or an arborist or as you are master gardeners, and you wanted to gauge how long a tree actually had great flowering for, then IBD is the way to do it. What that actually means is, from my observation, again, this is subjective over many years, you will see when a tree has about 50% of its canopy in bloom, anything beyond 50% are considered its blooming days. So a tree may have 20 intense blooming days, but it actually may have 50 blooming days, but only 20 days of which are intense bloomers. And the reason I cut it off at 50%, because that's when most people will notice the trees in bloom, and actually that's when they're most spectacular. So IBDs are based on my frequent observation of at least 3 trees within a single species, and for no less than 3 years, and in many cases much more than that. So here's an example of IBD. Okay, we have plumerias, frangipani. These are the same species, by the way. We have lutea, which is the yellow form or yellow color bloom, and rhubarb, which is the pink. And I tell you this right now, for the most part, and this average IBD date and longevity can shift according to the weather of the preceding winter. So for the yellow flowering plumeria, there is an average of 56 intense blooming days beginning April 16th, about mid-April, to about June 10th. For the pink now, the pink coming to bloom a little bit after, a week or so, but there is 117 IBD up until about August 22nd. And again, 50% or more of the canopy is covered in flowers. So let's move on here. Again, as I said, the biggest limiting factor for most ornamental flowering tree is temperature. So let's hit zone 8B, which is the warmest part of northern Florida. And I have a tree for you that I want you to look at. Here it is. This is the Jerusalem thorn, or Parkinsonia. If you take a look at this tree, and by the way, I did take this tree in Lee County here, it will grow all the way up in past Gainesville. As a matter of fact, there was one in Gainesville that I watched every year while driving to the campus. And you will see that this particular tree, it's unusual. It's kind of an airy tree. It does have some thorn. It is deciduous, but not for long. If you take another look at this tree, here it is in a residential situation. It came out of Mexico, Honduras, so it's a Central American tree, more, so it's not from the Middle East, but I guess, the Jerusalem thorn. You take a look now. The best to identify Jerusalem thorn, here's the first way, the leaves. What you're seeing here is a pinnate leaf. And the pinnate leaf, those little things off there, those are the leaflets. Usually when it's deciduous, the leaflets will drop, but not the central pinnate or more or less midrib. That will kind of remain on the tree. Now, I did make a slight mistake here on the leaves. I said 2 or 3 pinnate. It's not 2 or 3 pinnate. It's a single pinnate, but there are 2 or 3 leaves generally at the same point, at the same nodes that are coming out. And so it's not quite a whorl, but that's generally the arrangement. Let's take a look at another distinguishing feature. The flowers are arranged, and they're bright yellow, in raceme. And I'm going to define that as I move further along. And because there are so many flowering trees that have this type of inflorescence. Remember, the raceme is a particular type of flower arrangement inflorescence. You take a closer look. This then is the flower or individual flowers, better known as florets, of the Jerusalem thorn. Let's take a look at another species. This was taken up in Orlando. This is, we're moving to still on 8B. And in this particular case, this tree will tolerate temperatures down to about 18 degrees Fahrenheit before it cries uncle. It flowers from about May to July, and I don't have an IBD for this one or the Parkinsonia because they're not that common in my area. So I didn't record that. But this tree is in full flower. It's early May. It's not all that spectacular as so many other flowering trees are. But when you get closer with many of these trees, the closer you get, the better they look as far as I'm concerned. So one of the ways you can really appreciate many of these trees is to go under the canopy, look upwards, and I call this the on the view. So for some of these trees, I'm going to be showing you on the view. This particular tree is pretty nice. Look at the bark, nice and furrow. It has a nice pattern to it, nice and airy. So let's take a look at the best way to ID the tepu tree. The flowers are pea-like, okay, and the leaves are what we call pinnate. So these are alternate, odd pinnate, and perhaps, well, we're not going to define that today as maybe we should, but hopefully you all know that is. So this is a tepu tree. I saw one growing at the, what is it, down in Palm Beach at that, you all know, Mounts Botanical. Yeah, there's a large one there. So if you're ever down there, you can go see it. Pretty large one. We're going to move to a little warmer zone. We're going to call this 9A. This is the coldest part of Central Florida. And there are actually a bunch of nice trees that can grow here. For instance, Texas wild olive. That's the cordia, and that's one of the cordia. And you know, when I go through this and I speak of a genus such as a cordia, these are only, in many cases, a fraction of the cordias that are available, even as flowering tree. And the thing is, we may only know of 3 or 4 big ones. So this is the Texas wild olive. It's from southern Texas to goes all the way into Mexico, and in southern Texas it's actually more shrub because it's a little too cold there, but it does do better here. That's it right there. It's a beautiful tree, and you're noticing now that at least in South Florida you're beginning to see them more and more along the highway as indicated here. So this is along a highway right there. Now this is one that I would almost call a sequential bloomer. They don't all bloom at the same time, but independently they you may have 6 trees, 3 or 4 of them may be blooming, and they will bloom several times a year. So then this is the Texas wild olive. And the best way to ID this tree, this is a cordia, you'll have 56 to 82 IBDs. In this particular case, I didn't come up with one IBD number because there was so much variance in this in the IBD of this particular species. This is true for some species. They may vary from year to year, but you can convincingly tell your customer that, well, it should get 56 and may get 82 or more IBDs per year. Not a way to ID it, as in many cordias, the leaves are alternate, they're simple, and with lots of these cordias, they're rough. They're like sandpaper, believe me, especially when they dry out. And of course, they produce fruits that we call drupes. And these drupes are fleshy. And remember what a drupe is. A drupe is a fruit, and these are all fruit-bearing plants that has a single seed. So even a coconut is a drupe, but it has a hard exterior as opposed to these that have soft exteriors. Let's look at another tree. Can easily grow up north. This is to a certain extent. This is the weeping bottlebrush tree. It flowers here about January through May, and the month that it flowers is not, it's not very strict. It might bounce from one month to the other without even being commanded by cold or warm temperature. So for some reason, it may not follow that strict pattern, but enough to say it's gonna flower between January and May. And if we take a look at it a little bit further, this is the weeping bottlebrush, and there are about 2 or 3 others that grow in South Florida, but this is definitely the most spectacular. You can see how it weeps. So these branches, they're almost like willow. If you left them unpruned, they will touch the ground and they will obscure the trunk. So you're not even going to see the trunk. This tree is in full bloom, and let's go a little bit closer. There are approximately 41 intense blooming days. So it's pretty nice. 41 intense blooming days, that's a good recommendation in my opinion. But look at the flower arrangement. You can see that the inflorescence actually weeps, hang down, is pendant to the left. And if you look to the right, this is what we call a spike, because that center that holds the florets together, the florets or the inflorescence or the florets, the small flowers, individual flowers, are attached directly to that stem without a stalk. So this is what we call a spike. And you can clearly see why they call it a bottle brush. It has many florets, and here's a floret right here. So this, in essence, right here, is an individual floret or flowers. And in this particular case, with this particular tree, almost all of these florets become a capsule. Remember this, that individual flowers in an inflorescence are capable of becoming individual fruits. So a spike, as in the bottlebrush case, and you'll see it in a minute, can have many fruits with thousands of seeds within that evolve from that spike. So what's the best way to ID this tree? It's obvious. The leaves are. They're simple. They're linear. They're lanceolate. You know why? And the new growth is always silvery and pubescent and hang down. You can see the little hairs. Can you see that on the leaves? Okay, what's the next way? Of course, the inflorescence. And with this particular tree, can you see the little bees there that are hovering around? If you plant this tree and you don't like bees, you're going to be in for a shock, because you will get lots of bees. They love it. And this becomes almost instantly this. So you can see, moving from the center picture to the one on the right, all of these small florets became small capsules, and they're still attached directly to that central flower stalk. The growth below, let's go back to the center picture. You see new leaves coming below? Those are new leaves that came within the last several weeks. So as it's flowering, and as soon as it has all the inflorescence, the inflorescence is in place, it puts out new leaves while it's still flowering. And this tree, you can tell just about how much it has grown within a year by looking more or less at the distance between the capsule from one year to the next, and measure that distance, and they grow about 6-8 inches a year. So these capsules are what we call, take a look right here, these capsules from each individual florets are what we call persistent. And they'll hang on to that tree for the next year. And you know what? I took some of these into my office, put them on these capsules from a spike, put them in my office, and I tell you, the next day, thousands of seed came out. So these capsules open freely, and you know the great thing is, they're sterile, because I've never seen, with regards to bottlebrush, a tree with seedlings under it. Here's a cultivar for bottle brush. We call this the red cluster, and this is in Kissimmee. I took these picture, and probably I don't know April or something. But if you take a look here, they're smaller and they really don't weep. And for the most part, what you have here, this is mid-April. These are the flower buds right here. This is red cluster. But you notice that the inflorescence is upright as opposed to the weeping. And let's take a look. So you see an upright spike here. This is the red cluster. And the thing about the red cluster is that it will flower and then it potentially, as in this case, can produce not immediate leaves, but another cluster of flowers before it puts out new leaves. I don't have the intense blooming days for this one, but it's a smaller tree. It doesn't weep, or it doesn't weep as much. And I didn't illustrate this, but in many cases, this is a tree not with a single trunk, but with 2, 3, or 4 smaller trunks. That's how they normally grow this particular tree. So here's the red cluster bottle brush. Inflorescence are upright, and it is a small tree. Let's move on to the next one. Next tree right here. This is a beautiful tree, but it's a bad tree. Why? Bad tree. Well, there are no bad plants because they don't know how to behave like you do, for instance. But as far as their behavior is concerned, this is an invasive. On the Flepsy list, I hope you all know what Flepsy is. This is a category 2. And if you plant this tree or have this tree anywhere around, I want you to expect, and you will get, tons of seedlings. And there's also an insect, a bug that also follow this for their seeds. But this is a 9A. It's all over the place. It's commonly planted. This is it right here in about early November after its flower. So what you're looking at right there, see all that color on the tree? That's actually the fruit capsules, and they have seeds. Believe me, they have seeds. And after the flower, which the IBD is not that long, but the capsule color and retention on the tree is about 2 or 3 times long, maybe 4 times longer than the IBD. So let's follow this tree. This is early November, right? It's just flower. Now it's put, and it flowers in about October, November. Then it produces the seed capsule. By January, it's becoming deciduous. And by February, it's deciduous. And if you are recommending the tree for visitors, and the last slide will explain some of this, the trees that become deciduous when the snowbirds are here, for the most part, they don't plant them in many communities. But I have seen the golden rain tree planted in some community. So here it is. This is mid-February. So the best way to ID this tree, it produces what we call panicles, which are essentially double pinnate. And these panicles, and the IBD here is about 17 days. So for 17 gorgeous days, you're going to get a beautiful display. Forget about it being weedy, okay? Forget about it being invasive. But in any case, you're going to get a gorgeous display of flowers for at least 17 days on average. And the panicles are long. They may be up to, 18 inches. Yeah, but perhaps more. I've seen big panicles. And here's another way to ID it. Immediately after flowering, what do you get? Okay, you get these capsules. I don't have a close-up, but you can see when they initially come out, they're almost as beautiful as the flowers. So it's not just this that you're going to get here. What is it? 17 blooming days. You will get 30, 40 capsule days. Okay, let's move on. So we're going to jump now to the red silk cotton. You probably have seen this tree, and they get pretty big. So these are jungle trees, and they grow above the rest of the canopy in the jungle. They bloom in winter, so this is a good tourist tree. The one on the left was taken at Selby Garden in Sarasota. And if you look at these particular trees, I want you to follow this. Let's start from the bottom, ground upwards. And you can see the branches are divided into stories or tiers. So if you follow it up, At one intersection, there are 3, 4, 5 branches. Another 10 feet up, there are another 3 or 4, 5 branches, and so forth. The particular tree on the left has a split trunk. So if it had a single trunk, that would be more clearly seen. This is a beautiful flowering tree. The one on the right is in full flower, but let's take a look at what full flower means. Here's the on the view. Now, I don't know what you're looking at, what kind of screen you have, but this is not justice. You go onto this tree, and if you like bloomers, this is a fantastic bloomer. They're big, they're bold, they're audacious, and the thing about this tree is crows also love to feed out of them because the cup is big. So they can stick their beak in there, pull out not nectar, but I believe it's water that settles in the cup. And let's see right here. Look at the evolution of this flower bud. And you can also ID these three by their flower buds, by the way. And on February 25th, let's follow it. And here's the same view on February 28th. This is the same day, the 28th, but from a different angle. But the next day, remember, this is the last day of February. And then the first day of March, it's completely open. See that? Go to the second, at least the third day of March, and you see it's still on. And you'll see some other flower buds. You can see a flower bud above it. And when this one drops that's currently flowering, the next one will take over. So it's still flowering on the 5th. Let's move forward. And on the 7th, perhaps on the 6th, you can see that it dropped. And the other one right there you can see is as the first one was 28th of February, it's about to open, and perhaps the next day it opened. And you can see on the 9th here that perhaps it's the last day. And this particular one on the 12th is that third, this other inflorescence or that had not yet opened. Now, this is what you got to understand. When I say 40 flowering days or 10 flowering days, it's almost always never it's the same flower that flower for that long. So what you're having is, whether it's the raceme or this is a solitary flower, they take turn. So one will flower for a week, depending on the species, drop another for a week, and in the end, it accumulates, it adds up to long flowering days. So this is a red silk cotton. So it's a deciduous tree here in 12th of January. It's blooming. It's really pretty. You move along, 1st March, it's leafless, it's deciduous after flowering. Now, this is kind of unusual because most of the flowering trees are actually deciduous before they flower. This one is deciduous after it flowers. If we move along now, it gets all its leaf by May, as it did today, and it's all leafed out, no flower. And then, of course, it's going to have to drop all its leaves before it reflower in January or so. Okay, you ready for another tree? Let's see. Okay, here's something I want to point out with this red silk cotton. It's messy. This is one of the things, when you make recommendation, you may want to tell people, and I know some people don't like this mess, but see that? Those are all petals or flowers that have dropped, and it's totally messy on, March 22nd, or whenever date it is. So you may have to tell people that the petals or the flowers can be really messy, and even what we call material from the fruit. In this case, let me show you something. See this messy white silky cotton on neighborhood street is this right here. So the seed has to have a method of dispersing itself. And essentially what happened is, if you take a look here, the capsule bursts open independently and freely, unlike some other capsules. This is what we call dehiscent. They just burst open. There are 5 parts of this particular capsule, and each capsule has tons of seeds, but they're encased in what we call kapok, or this cotton. And when they open up, a little wind and the cottony mass just travels. So each of these little specks of white are basically from those fruits, and they contain at least one seed. So this tree will germinate, but not all seeds are viable or can do it. So this guy, when I was taking pictures, he said, "Oh my God, what a mess this guy next door tree has created. Every year I get this nonsense." But you know, everybody's still living there. I hope they're happy with each other. So as we move along, best way to identify the silk cotton tree, flower buds, and take a look at that nice flower. And you can see the bees coming to it right there on the right. And on all this, just as a point of interest, the stamen or the male parts, which there are many, are actually arranged in rows of 3. If you saw a flower that was in full bloom, you will clearly see that. And then, of course, in this case, we have palmate leaves. And what do we mean by palmate? It means one leaf with several leaflets that are joined together at one point. And you can see it on the left, right? The leaf on the left has 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 leaflets. The one on the right has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaflets. So what does that mean? A tree, any tree, if they might quite often describe it in the horticulture literature as having 3 to 9 leaflets. And you can see from the same tree, you can have 3 to 9, but most commonly 5 or 7 leaflets. So let's move on here, and let's see what we got here. We're going to jump now to 9B. Hope I'm not losing you. Wake up. Warmest part of Central Florida. So here we go. Let's see what's in there. This one is the Mexican Casalpinia. Beautiful tree. This is zone 9B. It will go down to 27 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is a beautiful tree. And there is something to note, and this will grow in Orlando. I've seen it up in Orlando at Box Tower. There's a tree there, maybe more than one. And if you take a look, this is one of the trees. This is a raceme. Now let me define what a raceme is. A raceme is an inflorescence. It's an inflorescence where the florets open up from the bottom and they go and progressively upwards. And as they open progressively upwards, the raceme actually extends itself. So this one flower here may last several days or several weeks in some species quite easily from the same raceme, and the display is fantastic. This one is what I call an episodic bloomer. Now, what do I mean by that? I showed you sequential bloomer. This is an episodic. What I mean by that is that if you take a look at the population of all these trees, they generally bloom together, whether on the east or the west coast. And they may bloom, in this particular case, 3 to 5 episodes. So they'll bloom for 10 days, a month later for another 10 days, etc., etc. On a bad year, you'll get 20 IBD with this episodic bloomer. On a good year, you may get as many as 6 to 5 IBD. This particular tree does not attract honeybee. What it does attract are bumblebees. And they're pretty cool. They fly in, they do the nectar thing, and they fly away, and everybody's happy. And let's move on to the next slide, because this is the best way to ID it. You get these inflorescence, the raceme, they're about 9 inches long. And here's a close-up of one of the floret. And also the leaves are bipinnate. You see that? And they're what we call odd bipinnate. And then these almost always fruits, and these are woody pods, and they're in cluster. And the reason they're in cluster because the florets from the racemes were in cluster, so the pattern of the fruit follows the pattern of the flowers. And as a matter of fact, you can look at fruits, not even seeing a flower, and tell what type of inflorescence it is, because the fruits are going to pick up, obviously, on that particular pattern. All right, what else do I have here? We got a starburst cleodendron. And this one actually have a couple of growth habits. On the left, you can see this flowering in mid-January, and it has a suckering habit. But if you cut the lawn and keep it cut like the tree on the right, it actually remains a tree without any bother from suckers. Okay, so it flowers in about January to April. It's a beautiful big flowers. Here we go. See that? And look at all that, and you know that's an inflorescence. It's what we call a cyme. It's a globose rounded cyme. The leaves are big, and the IBD is about 33 days. And what makes up the flowers? Here it is right here. Okay, here is one of the florets, and this is what we call. You can take a look. Guess what it is? What kind of? How would you describe this? Well, it's described as tubular. And another flowers with tubular are the oleanders. If you take a look, they have that. The petals are kind of fused. Take a look at this. You see from the open part of the petals and go all the way down to my finger. Follow it. That's still a petal, but it's fused together. So you have plants with freely open petals, and you have plants with petals that are fused together or partially fused together. So then this is a starburst clerodendron, and there are all kinds of clerodendrons, and some of them are pain because they're invasive. Thank God this one isn't. I don't believe so. Not invasive. So let's move on here. This is the best way to ID this. The leaves are opposite. You can see that on the left. They're big and they're kind of purple. There's a variegated cultivar. And let's move on to our next tree. This is the purple glory tree. Now we have two here that are in full flower. This is late March, beautiful tree, and they can be somewhat episodic bloomer. They might flower 2 or 3 times out of the year, but for the most part, most of them only flower once a year, and often in the summer. So these two are flowering in the spring. And here you see by mid-June, 2 same trees, they're not flowering. In most cases, however, the further south you go, these trees are not as much trees. So this is one you got to train to become a tree. So in most cases, this is them flowering, and they look more shrubby than they do tree-like. So this is one example where you can get a tree, but you got to work at it. Let's move up to the inflorescence. This is the best way to ID the species. Again, this is the purple glory tree. And I was at Epcot Center some years ago when I used to go there. And they have many of these. If you take a look, and you'll see. The stem, the newest stem is winged. That means it has corner to it. And these wings, pieces, they just flake off, drop on the ground. You put it in the wrong place. And if you're fussy about your garden, they can be messy. I'm not, by the way, but you might be. So if you take a look at the inflorescence, one is not open on the left. The one on the right is open. And they're about 8 inches long, but they will hang on. This is, in many cases, a summer bloomer for the most part. Okay, you ready for the jacaranda? Okay, California have the most jacarandas for sure. And a lot of people usually say, they don't bloom well in South Florida. Not true. They bloom great in Central Florida. They bloom well in South Florida. This picture is in South Florida. So the flowering months are from March to June. This particular species, this particular species, you have distinct sequential bloomers, very distinct, and they may bloom 2 months apart always. Some trees begin flowering in March, some in May, and some even in June, and they will stick to that schedule year round. So these are a couple here that are somewhat mid-seasonal bloomer right here. Beautiful trees. Generally, they begin to flower when they're leafless, without leaves. Then as the time progresses, a few days later, you begin to see them forming leaves right amongst the panicles, the flowers. The jacaranda, about 34 intense blooming days. And some trees don't bloom for 20 to 25 years. And this is, there's some species like the Royal Ponciana, the jacaranda. I would tell people, when you buy this tree or recommend it, get it when it's flowering. This way, you know you have a tree that flower, because some of the phone calls we get, and you all know this, is why isn't my flowering tree flowering? And one big reason is it's still a juvenile. Remember, when it flowers, it's mature, so it could, so to speak. So it's still a juvenile, and for some trees, some Jacaranda may flower in 4 days, 4 years, and some may take 20, 25 years. It all depends on the individual trees. So let's take a quicker look at this jacaranda. When you get it, it's going to have an upright structure. This is not pruned. That tree right there that you see, it's not a pruned tree. Rather, even if you cut this tree and prune it and try to broaden it, the jacaranda refused to do it for many years. So every time you see a jacaranda, upright growth until several years later, it begins then to get a dome shape, as you can see it here. Isn't that spectacular? I took this picture actually in the early morning, and there was some mist in the air. So when I was driving, man, it was like being in Shangri-La or someplace like that. Okay, here is the underview, and this is before it puts out leaves. And here, these are the best ways to ID it. The leaves are opposite. They're even pinnate, and they're about 20 inches long or so. Then you have the flowers that are panicles. You can see to the left, and look at this. That's on the left become that which is on the right, capsules. You see those capsules. Now, the capsule that he's holding are actually about a year old, and these capsules are retained for the most part on the tree for quite some time. In some cases, up to a year. And this species look a lot like the Royal Poinciana. And one way to tell them apart is the leaves are difficult, but the trunks are quite distinct, quite different. And of course, the capsules are quite different. The Royal Poinciana does not have capsule; it has pod. But let's take a closer look at these. At the capsule of the jacaranda, they're nearly round, and they are tardy dehiscence. What does that mean? It means it breaks open, but grudgingly. I had to force this open. This is like a bivalve. There are two parts to this one. And you can see in this case, this capsule, you can see the little seeds there all over my hand, and they're just cloaking this thin papery stuff. So when the wind, not much wind, just like the red silk cotton, it just blows. But unfortunately, this is not a invasive, so it really doesn't germinate. I don't even know if I've ever seen a seedling. Okay, let's move on. What do you guess we're going to have next? Let's see. Oh, here we go. This is the apple blossom tree from Javanica, Java, Indonesia. It's a cassia. Now, cassias are a big genus of trees that are flowering trees. There are many of them, and they're similar to the senna, and they were grouped in the same genus at one time, but very distinct, as you may see. So this is one here. This is in full bloom. I took this about 2 months ago or less, and it's beautiful. This is one tree that you may want in your yard. It gets to 40 feet, 50 feet wide. And the thing about many of these flowering trees, they can substitute as shade tree as well. So they're both flowering, and you can see this is a nice shade tree as well. So they're flowering trees and shade tree. And this is the on the view, and look at this. Every centimeter of that stem is covered in blossom. They call it the apple blossom because if you're familiar with the blossom of apples up north, they kind of look similar. And here we go. This is why it's filled with these blossoms, because everywhere you see a node, a racemes come out. See that? And let's take a close. By the way, 46 intense blooming days. I think that's pretty good. So some trees goes up to 50. And if you take a look at the raceme here, it starts out as really rose pink, and if you go down to the older florets, they fade out to a lighter pink, and it's a beautiful tree. When it's flowering, out of flowering, it's a great shade tree. 46 IBDs. Can't go wrong with that tree. Okay, best way to ID it, the leaves, they're alternate, they're even pinnate. And let's go now to the Royal Poinciana. This one is 9B, 25 degrees it can take. And some of your books, by the way, We'll say this may be in 10B, which is like 35 degrees, but from my experience, I have to, in many cases, differ with some of those recommendations because I've seen this tree in Central Florida. As a matter of fact, in one of the botanical gardens over there, they're worried that it might become invasive. So this tree does grow in that colder weather. Now I say that, and next year you plant one that's all frozen out. So, word of wisdom here. So look, it begins flowering in about late April to September. And again, this is a sequential bloomer for the most part. Most of the flower color we have in this area here or throughout our region is red. But there is a yellow flowering variety. And it's deciduous before it flowers. And I've been to other places in the Caribbean and so forth. And it's basically like this all the way through. It's deciduous before it flowers. And in some parts, you may think the tree's dead. Now, I want you to take a look here while we have the slide still up. And you see those black things hanging down? Those are the pods. And those pods were from last year bloom. And they're still hanging on. Of course, many more pods had fallen. Here is the same tree, 39 intense blooming days. It's beautiful. This is perhaps the most popular flowering trees in the tropics. If they have a restaurant, they'll probably plant one there and people eat and drink their cafe and cubano, whatever it is, and they do whatever they do under the tree. It's a beautiful tree. And the thing is that the shade is kind of eerie. It's not a dense shade. Now, here's an under view. This is late May. It's really beautiful. And what do we have here? The best way to ID this is, of course, the flowers. Again, about 39 IBDs. And if you take a look here, you can tell which of these flowers are the youngest flower. You can see the flower buds, right? It's not open. But if you see those petals that are kind of upright and they're a little different color, they're lighter colors, you see they're striated, those are what we call the standard. Those are, in some species, they're plants or flowers that have very distinct standard. So that's the uppermost petal, and some people think they're used to attract the insect as they come in. They see the standard, they land, and they do their pollination. This particular flower is more kind of a yellow peach color. You can see the standard right up there, and all the male parts and so forth. Let's move here. Another way to ID this is, of course, the leaves and the pods. And unlike the jacaranda, these are pods. The jacaranda had capsule that was dehiscent, tardy. It opens slowly. This case, these pods are indehiscent. They're fruits, and you can see why they call these a pod. The difference between a pod and a capsule, you know that? Remember that phrase? Like peas in a pod? What did that mean? They were all lined up in neat rows, one after the other. So when you look at pods, they're lined up in a single row. That's essentially what makes them pods. In this particular case, these pods do not open. The fruit will fall to the ground. The pods are still closed. In this particular case, what you're seeing is an animal actually chewed its way in to eat the seeds. All right, and probably a squirrel or something. And I have a great picture. I wanted to show you guys, but I don't have enough time, of pods littering the ground. What's the next plant? Let's move to the next plant. Can you guess what it is? Let's see here. Well, here it is, yellow cordia. So we already had the white cordia, the Texas geiger. This one here is a more tropical species. I don't have an IBD for it. You can see there are many species of yellow cordia, and most of the cordias are actually white in my opinion. But this is a Cordia lutea. It's a yellow cordia. Let's take a look. Here are the flowers. Isn't that beautiful? They're funnel shaped. They're nice. They're beautiful. And I'm going to jump now to 3 different cordias. You've already seen this one. This is the white geiger. Intense blooming days, 56 to 82 IBDs. It will tolerate temperatures down to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Then we're looking at this one now. This is the yellow Geiger. So we're going to 27 degrees from 9A, zone 9A, to zone 9B. Okay, this is quite often you see these having 2 or 3 trunks. So it can be shrubby. And this is the other cordia. Most people are familiar with this one in South Florida. This is more, and by the way, the zone here is wrong. This should actually be 10B, so I made a mistake. So this is about 35 degrees minimum temperature. It doesn't even do well sometime in 10A for 2 reasons. Number one, well, sometimes it doesn't do well throughout much of its growing range for one particular reason, and that reason is, here we go. Here's some new growth right here, but you can see it's flowering, and at the same time, it's black on top. What's causing that? Well, there is a beetle. Here it is. See these little beetle called the orange Geiger beetle. And if you take a look here, these are the larval form of the beetle, and you can see one piggybacking on the other. You take a look, and what they do is, they just chew the leaves to death. And that's a limitation as far as I'm concerned if you don't want to use chemical. Now, what I've noticed is if these beetles are attracted to a tree, they generally just stay on that tree till they hound it for eternity, so to speak. Let's see here. What else do we have here? So we have 3 cordias. They all can be grown in much of Florida. White, yellow, and orange Geigers. Golden shower. Really beautiful. IBD, about 36, May to July. This cassia. What was that first cassia we spoke of? That was the apple blossom, Cassia javanica. You saw that growing. Here's another cassia. This is fistula. The cassias are beautiful, okay? They're beautiful. This is in full flower. Here it is again. This is still in full bloom, but now it's reliefing. So flowering trees, in my opinion, they're more spectacular when they flower and there are no leaves there. Okay? Because then the majesty of the tree is on display as far as the flowers. That's when there are no leaves obscuring it. This tree here is still in flower, but the leaves are now making their way in, so it's not as dramatic as what we saw only a few days or whatever earlier right there. So, but it's beautiful, and here is an illustration. This tree here is in full flower, and let's walk in. Let's get a little closer. This is the 14th June. On the same day, go into somebody's house. That's the same tree. See that blue door? See that blue door? See that? Imagine just walking on that pathway, and this golden shower is really just showering down. It's a beautiful situation. So that's the golden shower tree. What's the best way to ID it? Well, we're going to start with the leaves. Well, okay, before we do that, here's an on the view. This is late May. And most of these trees now are coming out of bloom because we're already basically in July. So there are few of them are not that spectacular now. So the best way is this alternate, even pinnate. They can be big, up to 18 inches long, and they're oppositely arranged. So let's count the leaflets just for an exercise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 12 leaflets here. And you can see this is one leaf. It's a pinnate, and the leaflets are oppositely arranged, and there are 12 of them. Next way to ID this is a raceme that is pendant, and there are 36 IBDs here. That's over a month. That's not bad. And of course, the pods and all the cassias that I'm going to talk about, all of them, the leaves are pinnate, like the one on the left. The flowers, for the most part, are pendant. Well, not necessarily, but they're at least raceme. And the flower and the pods are long, and they start out green. And what you're looking at there are black mature pods, and they can hang on to the tree for some while. So here's another cassia. So this is our third. This is the pink shower tree, and this is another spectacular tree. You can get it confused with apple blossom cassia, but I don't know how many IBDs And my friend Doug Claudwell, he's into this thing himself. I think this is one of the pictures that he took. And by the way, all the other pictures I took, okay? So here's what Doug took. This is a tree on Sanibel. This is the 14th of April. It's really nice. This grows up in Central Florida too. And I don't have much on this tree, but look at these flowers. They're beautiful. And again, they look like Cassia javanica. This one, however, is the pink shower tree, aptly named. Okay, what's our next tree? I'm trying to do this as fast as I can, but I don't want to overwhelm everyone. But here's another cassia. This is Afrofistula. You can see this is probably from Africa, yeah, like Kenya and Somalia. So this is more or less a desert tree. Zone 9B, so it's adaptable to a cooler region. And I've kind of been neglecting this, but if you look at messiness, I consider this one low. So you may want to look at messiness too. And here it is. The panicle or the raceme, are upright. And here again, definition of the raceme. You can see that the florets that are the oldest are at the bottom. Flower buds are on the top. The florets on the bottom drop. The new florets on the top open. Then you have the prolong of the intense blooming days. This is a tree on June 6, 2012. Okay, and these trees begin to flower in about 1 to 2 years. This is it several years later, so it's a slow grower. Hasn't grown much. And they're treating this tree good. I make sure that they do that, even though I don't know the people. But they begin to flower, as you can see here, while they're still young. So this is in full bloom as far as I'm concerned, and it's only 1 to 2 years. So this is one, if you're going to buy it in season when it's flowering and make sure it is flowering. But some of these trees, you're not going to find them anywhere except in old neighborhoods. Here's another one. This tree is at least 25 years, and I've been looking at it for 20 years, and I swear to God it hasn't grown 8 inches, so it just about topped out its growth. It's a beautiful tree. The best way to identify the Kenyan cassia or Afrofistula, the leaves, like the other cassias, are alternate even pinnate, but they're small, relatively. The flowers, in this case, these are upright racemes, not like the, the golden shower, where it showers down. You remember going into the house towards that blue doors and it's just showering down? Well, this one is upright. And of course, with the cassias, they have pods that are indehiscent. They don't open up and they stay on the tree in some cases for a while. All right, I don't know if my time is drawing to a close, but stick with me. Let's see what we got next. This is one that's they planted. It's a beautiful tree. It has a long flowering days, IBDs, 117 days. It flowers when the people are here in mass, so it has a gorgeous display. I've seen hummingbirds on this tree. Rarely though, but I guess you can get them. So they nectar the tree, and it's a great tree. One quick thing about this tree is in some cassias, you see right there, this is June 5th, right? The tree on the left, it's the same tree on the 21st of June a year later. And a year later, this tree was hat-racked, bad pruning practice, but you know. And on the right, within a year, all the flowers are back. This is something that many tropical trees have. They flower on new growth. So even if you hack it, give it a year later, when the new growth come out, you're going to have a flower display as equivalent, almost as if you didn't cut it. Because many of the temperate trees, and this is why, I don't know if you know about pruning apples and peaches and all of that, they say the wood's got to be 2 or 3 years old, because it won't flower until the wood age, 2 or 3 years, right? On these tropical, they flower a new growth. So even if you hack lots of the tropical, and it also applies to, in some cases, some of the fruit trees, it will come back blooming. So here it is, and that's not bad right there. And let's move on and see how we describe this. These are racemes. They're both axillary and terminal. And I just want to illustrate this really quick. What does that mean? By the way, this is a messy tree. When it's flowering for 100 days, you're going to get some mess, mostly flowers, petals on the ground, because this is how it does it. When we say terminal raceme, that's essentially on the new growth. So that's that little stalk coming up on the right, and you see those little knobs? Those were flowers that dropped. And remember, what I said is that it'll keep extending itself with new flower buds and new flowers, and essentially that's what happened. Now follow that back towards the left, and you can see three, more than three actually, standing upright. Those are raceme that came off the axle, that came off the right where the leaf node is. So when that happens in flowering trees or just any trees, the bloom or the inflorescent or the solitary flowers that's at the very end on the new growth we call terminal. Those that are a little back, it could still be on relatively new growth, but they come right out of the flower axil, we call those axillary, because they come from the axil of the leaf and the flower. So those are axillary raceme right there. Let's move on. I don't want to waste much time. Here it is. Hong Kong orchid. Best way to ID it. Beautiful flowers. See that? And by the way, if you count the stamen, they're always 5 in this case. And another way are these leaves. Half the time they're nutritionally deficient. This case is iron deficiency, but half the time they're potassium deficient. And these are the leaves are of particular interest. So you got to fertilize it. It doesn't like high pH in many cases. Okay, I got to run. Coldest part of Zone 10A of South Florida. You can try this in Central, but no warranty there. Here you go. Shaving brush tree. This is Pseudobombax ellipticum. The tree flowers when it's naked or without leaves. You can see the flowers. And by the way, you see 2 flower buds. You see how much different they are from the red silk cotton? But they're kind of in the same tree right there. Here's a tree. Let's follow this tree. This is, I don't know when this is, but that's just before it flowers. And here it is flowering in April, so that was probably about March. And here it is back in June, and it has put on, once half of the tree has put on new leaf, the other half are just, leaves are just emergent. And I think it depends on what trunk, part of the trunk it was on. You can see that. So the shaving brush tree, the underview, it's beautiful, and you can see why they call it a shaving brush. And by the way, I want to show you something after I point this out. The new leaves on this tree, best way to ID it, the new leaves, no matter what time of year they come out, but after they flower, they bring forth new leaves, and they're always this silvery, nice color. The whole tree is covered in that. Those are the older leaves on the right. So take a look here. These are all new leaves. So for about 10 days, the new leaves give this nice coloration to them. And that's after the flower. So it's putting out new leaves, and the new leaves are a joy to see. So best way to ID these, here are the flower buds, look like cigar. That's how they describe them. They're basically 2 kinds, but I want you to look here. Here's a white, go to the right, and you see the right ones right here. If you take a look, that thing sticking up in the air, that's the female part, right? That's the pistil. The structures around it, or the stamen, those are the male part with the pollens tipped at the very top. The anthers are at the end of the stamen. So therefore, what happened is, remember, the pollens fertilize the female part, and what happened is a tube or something is sent down below into the ovary, so to speak, and then the flower, if it's fertile, then the seed or the fruit develops from this flower. Those curly things at the very bottom are what we call the petals. So for some trees, the showiest part are the petals, right? For other trees, like the shaving brush, the showiest part are not the petals, but the reproductive part, particularly, almost exclusively, if that's the case, are the male parts. So we're moving on here. This is Jamaican dogwood. We're getting more into the tropics, 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And I know we have lots of dogwood in Lee County, and we're 10/8, and these survive. This will probably go down into 8B, probably, but I don't know. Can't say that for sure. But it flowers from about May to July, and they're just about finished flowering now. Matter of fact, they're all done. And the leaves are pinnate. Growth rate is pretty fast. This tree is in full flower, but the flowers are so small. And here we are, we're looking at them. This is kind of an on the view. We're looking upwards. And with this tree, when you look upwards and look at the flowers, and these are inflorescence, of course, right? If you look upwards, the best part of the inflorescence is looking upwards. If you snap one of those and then look downwards, it doesn't look as pretty as looking upwards. Amazing. Okay, here's the on the view. Really nice. By the way, some of these trees will flower totally leafless, and some of them will flower with leaves on. I think that's an individual thing. But the blooming days is not long. There are only about 15 IBDs right here. And if we move on, the best way to ID this, look at that leaf. You all know now that's a pinnate leaf. And alternating on the stem. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaflets. The flowers or the panicles, they're about 15. And they start really flowering in May. By mid-June, they're about done. And look at this. These are the fruits. They become pods. And this is if you look, okay, look at the inflorescence in the middle. That means if they get all fertilized, you're going to have a jumble of things. The jumble are the pods on the right. See that? Because each of those florets is capable of making a pod. That's why you get that jumble. And if you look at individual pod, that's what it looks like. And that pod, that's the individual from that cluster, that pod has several seeds in it. Okay, I'm going to gotta rush. What time? Let's see what time it is. Okay, Verewood. They're beginning to plant these quite a lot. They're kind of replacing that Senna, Senator intensis that had this fungal disease several years back, and they want a yellow street flowering trees. But I'm telling you, you remember that Royal Ponciana that we saw in the beginning with that boy, and the tree grew faster than the boy? Well, that's a fast growing tree. This one is medium growing, but you know what? A lot of people don't know anything about trees, and they're all follow the leader. In a few years, maybe 10, 15, probably after I'm gone, this tree is going to be too huge. It's going to be close to an oak, maybe not that big, but over time these get to be pretty big trees. And what they seem to be doing is replacing a small Senna for a large Verewood. And they don't, I think, this is what I think, that they don't realize how big this can get. I don't have a big one here, but if we do see it, it's beautiful. It's an episodic bloomer, and here it is here. These are the flowers. They're kind of pinwheel. It's really nice. And here you see some trees, and it has a dense canopy. So these are trees along a park, and you can see how dense it has a beautiful shape. So these are getting bigger, and here it is. Best way to ID this. Look at the leaf. What kind of leaf? Please tell me. Let me cover over this here. Okay, what is it? Okay, they're pinnate. They're even pinnate. It kind of looks like odd pinnate to me. But anyway, even pinnate. And this is the flower. What happens to the flower? It's going to produce a fruit. And we have all kind of fruits. And what kind of fruit? It produces a samara. Must be, well, circular and with 5 distinct parts. So the object on the left, called the flowers, produces the object on the right that contains seeds. Verewood. It's a pretty nice tree. Nice shade tree. I'm going to rush through this now. Hopefully you have 10 minutes left or so. I'm sure Miss Eubanks will tell me to quit if I need to quit. But this is a silk floss tree. You're going to like this tree. It's a big tree. This is an old tree in Fort Myers. You can see they're digging up the street. They're always digging up the street around here. But if we take a look, that was it. Let's go back here to where they're digging up the street. That was late January there. You see that? It's leafless. This tree flowers then become leafless. Then about March, all of them on cue February, late February, early March, they put out new leaves. These are new leaves. And then by late October, the whole thing, or fall, the whole thing is in its glory. It's a fast grower. And here is the on the view right here. It's beautiful. And this is in November, so it's when people are here before Thanksgiving. It's beautiful. And the silk floss tree is a nice tree. Here is the here's the flower. These flowers, this is not an inflorescent. These are actually solitary flower, but they're so close together. And you can see the oldest flower, bud flowers. Then as you go back, the other flower. Out of it, you get 35 intense blooming days. And best way to ID it is there is some color variation. The flower on the right is kind of yellowish. There's a yellowish tint. The flower on the left are kind of pinkish. They all have 5 petals. And if you move along here, you can see, like the red silk cotton, their capsule. Look at that on the right. It's bursting forth, and you're going to get a lot of that K-pop stuff. Goes all over the place, and it's not pretty sometimes, but no big deal. Here it is right here. It's filled with the cotton. And the best way to ID it, see the leaves, palmate, serrated, see that? And look at the trunk. And the young trunk often have this yellow tinge to it. And it's thorny or spiny. You know the difference between a spine and a thorn? Well, we're not going to get into that now. But these are spines. These are big spines as big as your thumb or thicker. They're conical. And as the tree gets older, it sometimes it loses the color, that yellowish, becomes gray-like, and often it loses the spine. So it gets a little friendlier and it gets huge. So we just went over the several trees that are some people call Kapok, and I want to do a little quick refresher of them. The first one that we saw was the red silk cotton with about 26 IBD. Remember that? Okay. See that solitary flower? The next one we saw was the shaving brush. Remember that? And you can see they're both bombax, so to speak. So the 6 bombax, cebus, or pachara. And we only have one pachara here. This one you didn't see. I didn't show this one. This is a white silk floss tree. So it flowers in about November, and you can see the difference there. This one has about 41 IBD. It's a good tree, but you can't find it anywhere. So those are 3. Let's look at some more now. We already saw this. This is the silk floss tree. We just saw that. Here are some flowers. So actually what happened is they will start out real pink quite often. Then as the flower age, in a couple of days, they turn to this light color. Here's another one that you have not seen. This is the Ceiba pentandra. This is a giant tree in the forest. You go to Costa Rica, you'll see it 100 feet or more. It's not a true flowering tree. It will, some year it flowers better than some year. I'm very generous here. I'm giving it 17 IBD. But actually I think it's more like 14, 15. But let's be generous to this tree because the flowers aren't that pretty. But the flowers will litter the ground. It's like it's raining. Blam, 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 blam. And for 2 days it will do that. It will take a breather. Then another 2 days later, blam, 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 blam. A lot of trees. So this is the Kapok tree. Okay, this is really the true Kapok tree, so to speak. And if we move further, what's the last one? You haven't seen this one, but it has to be the Pachara. Here it is. This is a Malabar chestnut. All 6 of these have palmate leaves. All of them have capsule. The only one, the Malabar chestnut, there is no Kapok or floss in there. It's a big capsule, and I'm told that the seeds inside are edible. Let me know later on, okay? All right, let's move on here. What else do we have? I'm almost done. I think this could be the last tree. And by the way, there are many more trees. I can do 3 hours on this, 4 hours, but I gotta give you what I can give you in this time. So this is the queen crepe myrtle. It's not the crepe myrtle. Crepe myrtle will go up to North Carolina in the warmer areas, or South Carolina, or maybe even New York. I don't even know. But this one here is a tropical. And when I say tropical, it actually it doesn't do well below, I would say, below 35 degrees. But a mature tree will certainly live at 28 degrees Fahrenheit, easily so. So here we are, May 2012, 2016. That's 4 years later, same tree. And it's not quite in full bloom in this June 2016 picture. It's a beautiful tree. Here it is. This is another neighborhood. Early April. It's deciduous. Give it a few more weeks. Here you go. Same tree. 30th of May. So we're going from this. And when they become deciduous, I've noticed about this species, they're not all deciduous at the same time. Some of them are deciduous and some are not. So it's a scattered thing when it comes to being deciduous. But in any case, they're usually deciduous before they flower. And when they flower, they have leaves on. So here we go. See all those leaves? It's a beautiful tree. This is the queen crepe myrtle. It can get pretty big, and they're using them as street trees. So good luck on that in some locations. So here we go. I'm finishing up now. Remember I spoke about the terminal panicle, or the terminal, and then we have the auxiliary panicle. Already went through that. And this one, about 40 IBDs, 40 intense blooming days. And if you take a closer look, that which is extended is the terminal panicle. The one to the left of it is one of the auxiliary panicle. They can be 28 inches long. Beautiful. Just like its cousin, the crepe myrtle, the petals are kind of crinkled up. They're beautiful. And those are the fruits that are opened up on the plant. Good thing. These capsules are basically sterile, or we'd have a mess with many of these tropical trees. So remember, when you're going to recommend tropical trees, what you got to look for? It's not too cold. What you got to look for? It's not invasive. Consider how messy it is, and just let people know, because they don't want to be disappointed afterwards and have to cut the tree down because it's too messy. I know people do that. So here we go. Sequential in-season flowering. This is if you have people coming in and you want them to see trees, or you're recommending trees that bloom when people are here, as they call the what do you call those people? Snowbun. You know what I mean. People come here during the winter. I'll think of it. That's what happened to me when I do a lot of this energy stuff, like talking. September through October, the golden rain tree. And as I go down the table here, you're going to see that we're going to go more and more into the Taurus season. And October through November is the silk floss with 35 IBD. And by the way, I can make up another table like this with out of season or summer bloomers or whatever. Hong Kong orchid, 117 blooming days from November about through March, very messy. Purple trumpet tree, and I didn't do that one, but 21 blooming days. Starburst cleodendron, I did that one, remember? 33 blooming days. The Asoka or Saraka, I haven't done the blooming days, but I just wanted to mention this because this is a beautiful tree. And I'm seeing more and more of it being planted on the East Coast. And if we go down the list, remember the Texas wild olive? And we go down, we have the red silk cotton, beautiful tree, 26 IBD from February through March. We go down the list. This one is this is the episodic bloomer, 20 to 65. That means episodic, meaning it blew more than once a year. Silver trumpet, March through April. And I haven't gone through this. This is one of the tababuas, and there's several tababuas. And we can go through this. That's another talk. 16 blooming days. Shaving brush, 16 blooming days. That's me when I was 20 years younger. Okay, and that's me on the left when I'm what I look like today. So thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, are there any questions?
All right, Stephen, thank you so much. I think Wendy's been moderating the questions and answering them in the chat box as we've been going. So I don't know that she really has been answering them as she's been going. So would you give it like 3 or 4 minutes and see if we have anything else that comes in? Okay.
Sure,
As
and
far
I'll
as
read the
downloading the
comments while I'm
CEU
still here.
questions, you won't download them.
Thanks.
I think Wendy says you'll need to handwrite them out and give the answers to your coordinator. This video will be available next week after the holiday, so we will have it up then, and it will be on the Master Gardener website. And if you didn't see, Wendy said that you can claim 1.5 hours of CEU credits for this since it went overtime.